Hey everybody, it's Ron from Pick Dawgz, and this is the NFL edition of Ron's Rundown, where we're going to go over all the games in Week 5 of the NFL season. If you like what you see, make sure to give this video a big thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Helps us out a ton. And don't forget to put your NFL plays in the comments section below. Now, if you're looking for my best bets in the NFL, college football, baseball postseason, we got the NHL and NBA regular seasons coming up as well. You can find those plays at Pick Dawgz Premium. I'll have a link in the description below. Alrighty, here we go. Here are the games for Week 5 of the NFL season. First up, it's the London game between the New York Giants and the Green Bay Packers. We're going to see the Packers as pretty sizable favorites in this one. The total's set at 41, so one of the lower totals on the board. And when you look at this New York Giants team on paper, 3-1 to start the year. Defense only giving up 18 points per game and 332 total yards per game. Looks really strong, and it looks like maybe this Giants defense could be one of the better ones in the NFC. However, where I worry about this Giants team is a couple things. First of all, their strength of schedule. They face the Titans, Panthers, Cowboys, and Bears. Those quarterbacks, Ryan Tannehill, Baker Mayfield, Cooper Rush, and Justin Fields. Certainly none of those guys are Pro Bowl level quarterbacks like a guy like Aaron Rodgers, but really, I'm not worried about the Giants in the secondary in this game. I worry about their run defense. They've given up 4.7, 5.9, and 6.3 yards per carry in the last 3 weeks, over 140 yards on the ground each of those games. Now, again, those are with teams that do like to run the football. The Bears have really just focused on their ground game this season, Cooper Rush being the backup and against the Panthers with Christian McCaffrey, but this is still a Packers team that also loves to run the football despite having one of the better quarterbacks in the league. This Packers team has two really good running backs in A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones, and both guys are getting double-digit carries almost every single week. In fact, really, only one time Aaron Jones, week 1, only had 5 carries. Other than that, he's had double-digit carries this season. A.J. Dillon's had double-digit carries all season long. So I actually am looking at a player prop in this game. I like A.J. Dillon over 55.5 rushing yards in this one. The Giants struggling against the run. You got A.J. Dillon getting about 15 carries plus per game. I think we have plenty of chances to get this over, and it's actually a little bit lower than Aaron Jones's total, which I don't necessarily agree with, as A.J. Dillon's been more featured in the ground game, at least. Aaron Jones has been more of the passing back, but I think A.J. Dillon has plenty of chances to get us over this 55.5 rushing yards, so that's going to be my player prop for this one. Give me the over 55.5 rushing yards for A.J. Dillon. Next up, we see Kenny Pickett and the Pittsburgh Steelers taking on Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills. Now, the Bills are the biggest favorites on the board this week, laying 2 touchdowns, 14-point favorites in this game. Now, the Bills have actually been quite comfortable laying double-digit points as the favorites in the last year or so. When you look at the game between the Titans this season on Monday Night Football, and you look back to 2021, the Bills have been favored by double digits 8 different times. And against the spread, they're 5-1-2. So 5 wins, 1 loss, and 2 pushes. And that includes the big cover this year where they were laying double digits against Titans. 41-7 your final score. And I know you look at Kenny Pickett, it's definitely the right decision, in my opinion, for the Steelers to get him some action as the starting quarterback. Mitchell Trubisky just not getting it done for your offense. But even though Pickett had 2 rushing touchdowns, he had 76 completion percentage, 10 of 13 passing for 120 yards. He also had 3 interceptions. He made some mistakes. He's a rookie quarterback. I do think he'll develop over time, but I don't love this spot for him in a very tough road environment against one of the better defenses in the league. And you got also one of the better offenses in the league going with Josh Allen and company. I just don't think this is a very good spot for the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I'm willing to lay the 14 points. They've been good as big favorites, really. Favorites of double digits or more in the NFL overall have been pretty solid against the spread, but the Bills certainly have been there, done that. Give me the Buffalo Bills laying the 2 touchdowns in this one. Next up, we see the Los Angeles Chargers taking on the Cleveland Browns, with the Chargers as small favorites. But I'm actually looking at the total in this game, as when you look at the Cleveland Browns on paper, their secondary, the really good numbers that they're producing, 56.9% completion percentage to opposing quarterbacks, one of the lower totals in the league, and only 213 passing yards per game allowed. However, we got to look at the quarterbacks and the teams that the Browns have faced this season. They faced Baker Mayfield and the Carolina Panthers. We know he's struggling, and that offense is struggling overall. The New York Jets and Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco now on the bench since Zach Wilson has returned. The Pittsburgh Steelers and Mitch Trubisky, who's also on the bench, and Kenny Pickett's got the start this week. And then the Atlanta Falcons and Marcus Mariota. So Mariota probably the better starting quarterback out of all those teams, and that really doesn't say too much. When you look at Justin Herbert, played really well against the Chiefs, then he was banged up in that game and didn't really perform well at all in the next game against the Jaguars. May have had to deal with that injury, but then bounced back in a big way against the Texans. 34 points the Chargers scored, 338 yards through the the air that Justin Herbert had, and that's still without Keenan Allen in the receiving group, as Mike Williams, Gerald Everett have really stepped it up since Keenan Allen has been out. When you look on the other side, the Cleveland Browns, their offensive line has really helped this offense overall. They're running the ball 5.0 yards per carry. Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, two elite running backs in my opinion. They're not taking many sacks, only 5 sacks allowed this season. So the offense moving the ball, scoring some points. Now we saw last week it wasn't the strongest offensive showing in terms of points per game, 20 points in that game, but they still had 400 total yards of offense. They were able to move the chains, only took 1 sack in that one. The Chargers defense has been inconsistent this season. The secondary struggling. I think we see some points in this one. Give me the over in the Chargers-Browns game in Cleveland. Next up, we see the Minnesota Vikings hosting the Chicago Bears in this NFC North battle. And the Vikings are 7.5-point favorites in this one. And for me, this is just a fade of the Chicago Bears, especially when they're playing on the road. So far this season, 0-2 both straight up and against the spread on the road to the Green Bay Packers, losing 27-10 on Sunday Night Football. And then last week to the Giants, 20-12. The offense just hasn't been there. The offensive line really struggling the last 2 weeks. Even though you got a really mobile quarterback in Justin Fields, they've allowed 11 sacks in the last 2 weeks. And who were the teams that they played? The Houston Texans and the New York Giants. Now, I'm a Giants fan, and the defense has looked pretty good overall. But, I mean, 11 sacks to the Texans and Giants. I just can't trust this Bears team now, especially a back-to-back road games. And the Minnesota Vikings, coming off the London game, it's not necessarily the greatest spot to be in. And sure, they didn't look the greatest in that game particularly. They only won by 3, failing to cover the closing line. But I still think the Vikings are just a far better team right now in a very tough home environment where they've won their first 2 games in their home games, 23-7 over the Packers and 28-24 over the Lions. I think they win this game by 10 points. So give me the Minnesota Vikings. Not my favorite game on the board, but that's where I'm leaning with the Minnesota Vikings. Next up, we see the New England Patriots hosting the Detroit Lions, with the Patriots as 3.5-point favorites. Now, really disappointing loss for the Patriots last week at Green Bay, as they covered the spread with these, but they lost the game in overtime, 27-24 final, and it was a real close game. Patriots certainly had a shot in that one, and they really shouldn't have had a shot when you look at Brian Hoyer having to be the starting quarterback due to the Mac Jones injury, and then Brian Hoyer getting hurt in the beginning of that game, and Bailey Zappi, the rookie, making his first NFL appearance, having to come in, and I thought he held his own. He went 10 of 15 passing, about 100 yards passing, 66.7% completion, and a touchdown pass as well. You know, the offense didn't do much overall, but the defense was still strong, and I do think that the defense is going to win the day in this game for New England. As I can't trust this Detroit Lions defense at all, and it'd be one thing if this was just a one-week thing where we saw last week against the Seahawks, they gave up 48 points, 555 total yards, 7.1 yards per carry. Geno Smith looked like a Hall of Fame quarterback in that game, and it'd be one thing if this is just a 1 week that they struggled, but this has been the case with the Lions for quite some time. All season long, their secondary has struggled. They're giving up 35 points per game this season. Last year, we saw 27 points per game. The secondary also struggled. The defense was one of the weaker ones in the NFC. So even though this offense has taken real big strides, the offensive line is strong, the run game is good, Jared Goff has actually improved quite a bit, the defense is just not in a good enough spot for me to take them, even getting 3.5 points on the road against Bill Belichick and his strong New England defense in a tough environment. So give me the New England Patriots laying the points at home. Next up, we see the Seattle Seahawks taking on the New Orleans Saints, with the Seahawks as 5.5-point underdogs, and the total set at 46 points. Now, this total opened up at 41, now up to 46, and I still think there's some value with the over in this game. When you look at Seattle defensively, not having a good start to the year, we saw last week really struggling, 45 points allowed to the Lions, 500 total yards of offense, hasn't been good. The secondary struggling as well, and now they have to go on the road. I don't expect much success for the Seahawks defense, and there's no surprise to see, even though Seattle won last week, that they're 5.5-point underdogs in this game. However, the offense has been just fine, and actually, we can all agree Geno Smith has been far better than Russell Wilson has been in the Denver Broncos this year. I mean, Geno Smith, 77.3% completion percentage. You'll take that all day long. I know this offense is more conservative. It's naturally more conservative under Pete Carroll, who's more of a defense-first coach. But they're still scoring points. They're still moving the ball. Last 2 weeks now, 23 points and 48 points against the Lions and Falcons. And I know the Saints defense is certainly better than those two teams, but Seattle's still moving the ball. Geno Smith doesn't make a ton of mistakes. Their passing game has been solid all season long. They've got plenty of weapons. We knew going into the year that DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett were two of the more talented receivers in the NFC. The question mark was at quarterback. You're losing Russell Wilson, but it really hasn't mattered. I mean, Geno Smith has been an upgrade so far. I'm not saying it's going to continue the rest of the season, But Russell Wilson has really struggled in Denver. Geno Smith hasn't, and I think he'll do enough here to score about 21 points to get us over this total. I think the Saints offense will take care of the rest of this game. Overall, I do expect a breakout game here for New Orleans offensively. And we saw last week, even with plenty of backups in that game, Kamara out, Michael Thomas out, Jameis Winston out, 25 points in that game against the Vikings. I think they can get more than that in this one. Give me the over in the Saints-Seahawks ballgame. Next up, we see the Miami Dolphins taking on the New York Jets. We're going to see the Dolphins as 3.5-point favorites, and the total's set at 46 points. Now, this is not my favorite game on the board, that's for sure, but I am going to take a small lean here with the New York Jets getting those 3.5 points. The Dolphins secondary has struggled this season, giving up 68.2% completion to opposing quarterbacks, and really overall the last 3 weeks, the Dolphins defense hasn't been sharp in terms of total yards allowed per game, and we saw the Jets offense start to get going at the end of that game against the Steelers last week, and overall the Jets defense has kept them in ball games this season, as overall only giving up 3.7 yards per carry on the ground, and I do think that the defense is good enough, especially with Tyreek Hill questionable for this game. We'll have to see if he is going to be able to play in this one. If he is, it's going to help the Dolphins offense overall, but Teddy Bridgewater in that first game, in the first half he looked solid. Second half against the Bengals wasn't very sharp in that one. I know he's good against the number. I just don't love him in this spot laying points on the road against a pretty fired up Jets team after their last win. They're not 2-2 to start the season, so certainly have something to play for right now. We're not used to seeing that from the Jets overall, but I'll take a small lean here with the Jets getting those 3.5 points. I expect a pretty close game overall. Next up, we see the Atlanta Falcons taking on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We're going to see the Bucs as 10-point favorites in this one. And when you look at Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, so his time in Tampa Bay, when the Bucs are 10 or more point favorites, so double-digit favorites, the Buccaneers are 8-3 against the spread. And I like them here laying the points. They're actually 2-0 as well against the Falcons when they're double-digit favorites. The Falcons have really struggled defensively against the Buccaneers in these most recent matchups. They just haven't been able to figure out Tom Brady and this offense. They've given up 48 points, 30 points, 31, 44, and 35 in the last 5 meetings. All victories for the Buccaneers, mostly double-digit wins in those games as well. And I think the Buccaneers, off back-to-back losses against very tough teams in Green Bay and Kansas City, I think the Buccaneers win this one in front of the home crowd and give them something to feel good about. I think they win this game by 2 touchdowns or more. So give me the Tampa Bay Buccaneers laying at 10 points in this one. Next up, we see the Tennessee Titans taking on the Washington Commanders. Now, the Titans are small favorites in this one on the road, but I do think the wrong team is favored. I think Washington, despite their offensive woes the last few weeks, I still think they're the better team. I think their defense has really stepped up the last 2 weeks, especially against the run. They took on a Philadelphia Eagles team a couple weeks ago that really runs the football very well, whether it's their running backs or Jalen Hurts, but they only gave up 72 rushing yards and 2.4 yards per carry. Then next week against Zeke Elliott and Tony Pollard, another pretty good running back group, they only gave up 62 yards on the ground and 2.1 yards per carry. So against Derrick Henry, this offense has kind of been one-dimensional this season. I do think the Commanders' defense steps up and holds the Titans to under 20 points in this one. That should be enough for a win, even though the Commanders' offense hasn't been great. Carson Wentz has struggled. I think the offensive line improved quite a bit last week after their debacle against Philly in the week before that one. I do think this offense still has plenty of weapons. I mean, their running back group is strong with guys like Gibson and McKissick. Their receiving group is also very strong. Scary Terry McLaurin leading the way in receptions this year. I think they grab the win at home. So give me the Washington Commanders on the money line and getting the points as well. Next up, we see the Houston Texans taking on the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Jags are 7-point favorites in this game, and the total set at 43.5. I'm going to take the under in this one. And, I think the Jags are the much improved team here. I think they're the much better team in this game, but I don't want to lay 7 points with the team we're not used to seeing as this big of favorites in spots, even against some of the weaker teams in the AFC. The Houston Texans offense has not been very good this season, 18 points per game. And last week, although they had a nice big run by Dameon Pierce, that was really the only thing to show for the offense in that game. And I don't love the way their offensive line has looked. I think the Jaguars defense has really stepped it up this season. I do think Houston struggles to score quite a bit, but at times we've seen the Texans defense step it up in certain situations against the Bears and Broncos overall, holding the Broncos to 9 points in that game on the road. Not a very easy thing to do, even though the Broncos offense has struggled this season. I think we're going to see a low-scoring game that the Jaguars win in the end, but give me the under in this Texans-Jags game. Next up, we see the San Francisco 49ers taking on the Carolina Panthers. We're going to see the Niners as 7-point favorites here on the road. And while it may be enticing to take the points, a boatload of points here with the home team, there is just no way that I can back Baker Mayfield and this Panthers offense right now. I mean, last week was the perfect opportunity for a breakout performance by Baker and the offense. You're facing a weak secondary, a defense that overall has struggled, and a team that hasn't really gotten any pressure on opposing quarterbacks, so you should have plenty of time in the pocket. And he only got sacked 2 times in that game, but he just did not look good at all in that one. Baker Mayfield and the offense in general didn't do anything in that game. The defense struggled in the second half, and now there's just no way I can take this Panthers team. When you look at the 49ers defensively, under 300 total yards allowed in each of the first 4 weeks. They're not giving up virtually anything on the ground. They're getting after the opposing quarterback. 7 sacks last week, 4 sacks a week before that one. So now 11.6% of opponents' passing attempts end in a sack for San Francisco, and that is not good news for Baker Mayfield, who has currently a below 55% completion percentage. He's been one of the worst quarterbacks in the league in terms of against the spread record in the last few seasons. I'm not the biggest fan of Jimmy G and this Niners offense, but I will say, with Trent Williams out, the best offensive lineman on this team by far, this offensive line stepped up in a big way last week on Monday night, they didn't give up a single sack in that game. Their offense was able to do, situational offense, 24 points. The running game was solid. Jeff Wilson had a nice run in that one. I think they do just enough here to win this game, trust their defense, and win this one by double digits. So give me the San Francisco 49ers laying the points in this one. Next up, we see the Dallas Cowboys taking on the Los Angeles Rams. Now, the Rams are 5.5-point favorites in this one, and I do like the Rams to win this game by a touchdown, so I'm willing to lay the points here with the home team, and I do think the Rams are going to be forcing Cooper Rush to throw the football quite a bit in this one. The Rams' rush defense has been very strong, under 100 rushing yards per game allowed this season, and only 3.9 yards per carry. The Dallas Cowboys' run game has been inconsistent. The offensive line obviously dealing with some injuries, and last week only 2.1 yards per carry against the Washington Commanders. Overall this season, subpar numbers from a pretty good overall, where we've seen it for most years for the Cowboys' run game with Ezekiel Elliott. He hasn't really had a very good start to the season, and I think that's going to be the difference here. I think Cooper Rush has been good at quarterback for the Cowboys as a backup, but I don't think he's the answer going forward. Dak Prescott should be returning soon, and I don't like Cooper Rush in this particular spot because I think the Rams are going to be forcing his hand quite a bit in this one. Give me the Los Angeles Rams laying the points at home. Next up, we see the Philadelphia Eagles taking on the Arizona Cardinals. The Eagles are 5-point favorites here on the road, and I don't blame you if you go the other way, but right now I'm taking the Cardinals and the points +5 right now at home, as I do think the Eagles are just a little bit overvalued because of where we see them this season. 4-0 overall, 3-1 against the spread. Another big win against the Jaguars last week after they were down 14-0 early. They came back in a jiffy and covered the original spread at 6.5. But Arizona last week, I think it was their best defensive showing. They're starting to get some more pressure on the quarterback. They're not really giving up the run at all. And when you look at the offense, also starting to get things going in the right direction now. Nowhere near where they were last year offensively quite yet, and when they get DeAndre Hopkins back, that'll certainly help their chances. But Marquise Brown's been a solid number 1 wide receiver in this offense, and I do think this is going to be a pretty high-scoring game overall, and I'd like to have those 5 points in my back pocket, especially I do think the Cardinals have a decent chance at taking this game outright. So give me the Arizona Cardinals plus the 5 points in what should be a really fun game to watch. And in our Sunday Night Football contest on NBC, we see the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. The Ravens are 3.5-point favorites, total set at 48 points, so one of the higher totals on the board this week. It makes sense when you look at both of these offenses starting to get going. The Cincinnati Bengals, 27 points each of the last 2 weeks. We know the Baltimore Ravens this season have had plenty of high-scoring affairs. Last week wasn't one of them against the Bills, but I still think this offense is in good shape overall. I lean towards the over, and I know we've seen a lot of primetime unders this year, but I lean towards the over, but I'm going to take the Cincinnati Bengals plus the points. I think this is going to be a very close game, could be a back-and-forth game, and it also could be a game decided by a field goal, maybe a game-winning field goal. I'd want to have those 3.5 points in my back pocket. Now, I say you don't take an underdog, especially at 3.5 points or fewer, if you don't think they have a chance at winning the game. I'm not going to take the Bengals thinking they're going to lose by 3 points. I think they have a decent chance at pulling off the upset, but in the case that this is a 3-point Ravens win, I'll certainly be happy to cover with that hook at 3.5. When you look at Cincinnati, their offense is starting to get going. They're having a lot more time in the pocket pocket for Joe Burrow. That's really important for me. As you look the first 2 weeks against the Steelers and Cowboys, 13 sacks allowed by the Bengals. The last 2 weeks against the Dolphins and Jets, only 3. So really big improvements there. Their defense is starting to get pressure on opposing QBs. They're stopping the run. The secondary's been decent, not great, but it's been overall improving. And you look at the Ravens defensively, plenty of injuries. Now they are getting healthier, but still hasn't been the best defensive showing from Baltimore overall this year. And I do think the Bengals keep this game close at least, if not win it outright. So give me the Cincinnati Bengals plus the 3.5 points in this one. And in our final game of the week, we see your Monday Night Football contest on ESPN. It's between the Las Vegas Raiders and the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, the Las Vegas Raiders last week, a breakout performance offensively, 32 points there. Now, I know 7 of those were via a scoop and score by the defense, but still a good showing offensively, 5.6 yards per carry. The offensive line held up, which has been an issue at times for Las Vegas. And overall, I like their chances to at least put up a fight here on offense against a pretty good Chiefs team. Now, the Chiefs secondary has been a little bit of an issue for them, but overall, this Chiefs team has been one of the tougher teams to face right now in the NFL. Last week, going into Tampa Bay, putting up 41 points and beating the Bucs by 10 points as the underdogs in that one. Patrick Mahomes having a real good start to the year. I expect this Chiefs offense to do plenty against what I believe is one of the weaker defenses in terms of the secondary, the pass defense in the AFC. I think we see plenty of passing attempts from both offenses. I like Devontae Adams as a DraftKings selection if you do daily fantasy, but give me the over in this Raiders-Chiefs game to end the night and end the week. And that's it. Those are the games for Week 5 of the NFL season. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. And don't forget to put your football plays in the comments section below. Again, if you're looking for my best bets, you can find those at Pick Dawgz Premium. As always, this is Ron Romanelli. Good luck.